Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Trade the Chain. It is Monday. Happy Monday to everybody. August 30th, probably one of my favorite days of the year. And thank you all for joining. And I apologize right off the bat for no episode Thursday. Or don't laugh at CJ's hat, Ryan Larson. But I apologize for no episode on Thursday or Friday. There was a lot of traveling going on. I'm sure there was a handful of viewers here who went to the Daytona race and all that good stuff. But as usual, CJ and Monty are crypto analysts from MarketRebellion.com. And we have a lot to talk about and are feeling quite good. I know some tokens and coins are a little down today, but don't be. I think things are going to turn around in the short term. Before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that everything we say, vocalize, talk about, analyze, or anything else, including any discussion about Monty's guitars behind him, is not to be considered financial advice. We're here merely for your education. So thank you very much. Monty, CJ, how you guys doing? How's your weekend?
Doing good. Happy birthday as well, Alex.
Thank you very much, sir.
46
You're turning
years young.
26. Yeah, you don't look a day older than 28, but 26, not bad.
26 years young. Bishop, thanks for calling me out of my green screen, man. All right. I couldn't find my TTC one, so I had to go with the piano in the background. Everybody knows this isn't Puerto Rico behind me. So 46 years old today. Thank you very much for the wishes, gents. So what's the mood though like with you guys? We got the market. I mean, kind of a mixed bag today, but overall, how you feeling? Because we're ending this month and we made a lot of big calls, in the previous 3 to 4 months with the second leg bull startup. So is it happening?
I think so. And because of that, I'm excited. We're going to talk about some things today that are, short to medium term, very bullish. I think there's a lot of reason to be bullish on alts as well. CJ's talked a lot about this cup and handle formation that we're seeing in many assets across the board. And we're seeing some, break out of that formation already. So we'll touch on that. But I think there's good reason to be excited going forward for the next month to 3 months.
Awesome. CJ, your input.
Yes, Monty, a lot of good points. Completely agree. Also, very low put to call ratio, meaning that there's in all expiration dates, there's actually twice as many calls outstanding versus puts in the open interest in Bitcoin options, which we're going to dive into and try to explore because it's the lowest point it's been since December of 2020. And if anyone was around during December of 2020, they know that was an incredible month for Bitcoin. I think we did about 50% and then just went parabolic up to 40K following that. So we'll dive into that, the charts and more. But I got to say, I'm very excited as well.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people new to the market. December definitely was exciting. I know there's a lot of people that came in January and February as well for their first time. But, the one wisdom we can impart on you folks is that if you were around from 2018, 2019, 2020, all the way to the end of that year, those were 3 years that we sat around in this business. And it felt like the last 3 months, exactly like the last 3 months. It's hardcore. All right, who's going first? Who's hitting the charts first, guys?
Let's discuss Bitcoin first, and then we can move into ETH and potentially a lot of these cup and handle patterns within the alts that Monty mentioned. You want to talk about sentiments or what we're seeing on the dash first, Alex?
Nope. Yeah, the wrong button was hit. I apologize.
All right, sir. So going down to the Bitcoin chart, I want to give kind of a longer term perspective here that has to do with the put to call ratio being so low and kind of observing the time in history when it was that low. And that time in history was all throughout December of 2020. Like I had described previously, right before the trend really went parabolic. And there's actually some similarities between technicals. We had this run up back in those days, and I remember technicians saying, we just went from 10,000 to nearly 20,000 in such a short period of time. We have to correct and consolidate. We're getting way too ahead of ourselves. But the illiquid supply at that time was very high, and like Bitcoin didn't necessarily care. And this is one of the instances where oscillators actually became a little bit less effective, at least when it came to looking at these bearish divergences. And a bearish divergence is what we always refer to as when the RSI, CCI, or really any oscillator is making lower highs while the trend continues to make higher highs and higher lows. And that's actually what we're seeing right now. So we have been kind of holding up the flag of caution as we've seen a bearish and negative divergence in the RSI while price continues to create higher highs and higher lows. However, we have something that's pretty interesting. We have a period of time where we have a low historical put to call ratio that shows investor sentiment, or at least sentiment in the options and derivatives market on Deribit and the CME, that traders are very bullish. And they remain that way still, even though we might have some negative divergences. I think something that's probably more important is some more Glassnode data that I'd like to show. But just to get some of these charts out of the way, this is the put to call ratio that I was talking about. And if you focus on this purple line, that shows the ratio between puts and calls. And the lower it gets, ultimately, the more interesting it becomes to us. And it hasn't been that low, as you can see, since late December of 2020. So a little bit notable there. Also, when we look at Net's position change on all exchanges, still seeing some positive funding rates or negative funding rates being somewhat bullish for the trend, somewhat still hinting at accumulation for longer term players. Speaking of longer term players, we now have more long-term holders than ever before in history. I think this is an incredibly bullish metric. Monty has also pointed this out very correctly last week, and it's continued to remain that way. Another bullish thing that doesn't have to do with this chart, but I want to mention regardless, is the fact that we talked about a massive amount of inflows to exchanges last week. We're starting to see inflows subside. So that bearish sell pressure has pretty much been alleviated in my mind. But as you can see, I mean, we've really never been this high up in terms of long-term holders and overall supply, as you can see here by this very red or pink line. Also, we have the SOPR hitting a reset period back when we were in the accumulation zone from around 29 to 30K. Ever since, we've bounced straight up back and are now recovering at another potential bull phase. So like the COVID sell-off back in March of 2020, and like some other sell-offs that we had experienced a little bit earlier on in the bull market, this to me shows that we are now exiting an accumulation phase and are starting the markup phase, because we've already seen a tremendous amount of profit in the last month alone. But the last thing I'll say here before passing it off to you guys is that we've had an extraordinary amount of Bitcoin locked up or being held currently by long-term holders, about 12 million coins. And so 12 million on its own is over half of the circulating supply, or half of the total supply. And then when you consider about 3 to 6 million have been lost forever or are burned essentially, that projects the long-term holders, the true like Rick Astley holders, as Willie Woo likes to say, they control about 80% of the total circulating supply right now. And so I think that is another incredibly bullish metric that isn't really consistent with blow off top periods like the start of the bear market in 2018 and so forth. So,
well, let me ask you this, CJ and Monty. Jeff poses a good question. We're going, we're all expecting the second leg to happen with this bull market now. There's a lot of bullish signals going on, but is there any thought with decisions coming down from the Fed in the month of December and how that may impact crypto based on its correlation with the S&P 500?
Yeah, I think that could definitely be a potential catalyst. And I think, we're seeing that already kind of the market's waiting for that verdict to come down with that infrastructure bill to see exactly what it's going to look like and what the tax implications of it will be. I think a lot of institutions right now are sitting on the sideline waiting. And CJ made that comparison, back to December of 2020. I think it's a very apt comparison. And in order for that next leg up to begin, I think the institutions are just waiting for that regulational clarity that will come, in the middle of September when we get that infrastructure bill clearly laid out. And from there, I think that we'll see, an inflow of institutional capital, that combined with the supply shock from the long-term holders chart that CJ just showed, I think is really going to be a catalyst to drive us to new all-time highs.
Oh, wow. So that's a great way to look at it. I wasn't expecting that answer. I thought it was going to be pretty binary. If does the tax ramifications of that bill, are they going to? That's not going to be a single factor in the negative price action movement. Do you think?
No, I don't think so. At this point for crypto, I think we're, at the point in the market cycle where we're significantly diverged from stock to flow. There's a significant amount of the supply locked away with the long-term holders, and that in conjunction with the fact that the S&P just continues to make new all-time highs, I think just bodes very well for Bitcoin. So I think the one thing that could be a potential negative catalyst for price won't be the infrastructure bill, but rather it could be, a downturn in the traditional equity markets. But that doesn't seem to be happening, and Bitcoin just continues to climb. So,
yeah,
Alex,
go ahead.
I just want to make a short point. I think the infrastructure bill, if it gets passed, regardless, obviously there's some not great language in there when it comes to crypto, but in terms of like the traditional markets, if that bill gets passed, there's going to be a lot more money sent, and I think it's going to be very good for the overall equity market, which in theory should be good for crypto as well, in terms of like hard money printing and things of that sort.
I do agree with that. I also agree with something I think that we've all discussed over the last couple of weeks, and that is how the S&P is going to be propped up for the medium term. I just don't see it within within the Fed's best interest to not support it. And I think even if it's an artificial support, I think we're going to prop the market up going throughout the rest of this year and into next. After that, I don't know, but that's my thoughts. Any thought on that, Monty and CJ?
Yeah, I think depending on what the S&P does is definitely going to, dictate price action. And while we're on the topic of, the parallels between now and the end of 2020, I think taking a look at the S&P can give us a good idea of kind of what we need from the S&P in order for that rally to take place for that second leg up here. And looking at the S&P, just take a look at how it performed from the period of about the end of September until the end of 2020. This is the weekly chart here. We're putting in, week after week of just new all-time high, continued bullish price action. About 10 of these 12 weekly candles here were bullish candles. And in general, the market was in a very risk-on state here. Obviously, that all changed with COVID, but during this time right here, the market was very, very risk-on. And now you take a look at Bitcoin and kind of how it performed during that time. Obviously, you can see that risk-on environment boded very well for the price action and speculation on Bitcoin. So I think that we could see a similar thing to close this year, guys. As long as the S&P, continues to make new all-time highs, that risk-on behavior stays in the psychology of the market, I think it's a very good thing for Bitcoin.
Monty, do you mind going back to the S&P weekly CMF? Because I saw that was pretty ascending as well.
Yeah.
Which speaks to capital coming back in and continuing that leg up. Yeah. So, you're still seeing convergence in the CMF. If you were seeing a significant divergence on the weekly chart, meaning if we were having the CMF decrease and price still going up, that would be concerning in terms of the S&P 500. But judging by this chart, judging by a lot of the things that individuals like Tom Lee and Tony Dwyer have said, and in terms of like how they've compared liquidity in the market to our current state to times like, post-recession, say like a 2010, I think we got a decent runway here of about maybe 6 to 9 months before we see any significant major corrections in the equity market. So I think we're going to have enough time here for Bitcoin to fulfill stock to flow. And it's going to be another interesting question that we have to debate, is the concept of like, a super cycle, or do we break the halving cycle of 4 years? Personally, I still think that we're probably going to stick to a 4-year cycle and probably going to go through another bear market, but I'll leave that discussion up to you guys as well.
Well, I like that discussion. What are your thoughts on that, CJ? Because a 4-year cycle is something we've obviously gotten used to. We almost predict around it basically as a milestone.
Yeah, the common, like a lot of certain on-chain analysts have started saying that, I think that we're going to see a super cycle. I think that the 4-year cycle is going to be broken. I don't know yet. I think that human psychology gets ahead of itself, and that's why we create these parabolic waves in Bitcoin. And the more parabolic you go, I don't know. I am yet to be convinced of the 4-year cycle ending.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, CJ. I mean, it's obviously holding up very well now, but I think there is a decent argument to be made for the degradation of that 4-year cycle, because if you think about how important the miners have been to Bitcoin and its price action so far in its existence, they have been so critical. So much of the buy and sell pressure has come from them. So obviously, when you have those halving events, it can really dictate the supply and demand mechanics here. But I think that now we have just such a different market dynamic where there's participation far beyond the miners. Like, you showed that chart, CJ, of the amount of Bitcoin locked away by long-term holders. I think that is really the most important factor in dictating supply and demand now, and not so much the halving cycles anymore. I think that we're seeing so much Bitcoin locked away by these long-term diamond hands hodlers that it's just, that we're seeing a supply shock we could potentially see a supply shock even without a halving cycle acting as a catalyst.
I think we're going to see a supply shock in the short or in the medium term. Definitely, I think that's a great, and that indicator that CJ points out is going to be the factor that does it.
Yeah, I think that's the strongest argument, is long-term holders just increasing. And Willy Woo and many other on-chain analysts have talked about this as well, as the miners all throughout like Bitcoin's first 10-year history, they were the predominant buyers and sellers of Bitcoin, or specifically the sellers, right? Because they needed to run their operations and they were creating new coins. But that is actually going to shift, because exchanges are going to be the largest sellers of Bitcoin after we get through more and more halvings. I still think that 2024 will probably be a significant halving and will lead to another 4-year cycle. But due to the nature of, each halving being exponentially less significant than the previous one, I think 2028, it probably won't matter in terms of the halving cycle. However, 2028 is the year that the average millennial reaches their peak income earning year. Monty's smiling because I've said this statistic a lot before. But it's pretty interesting, and we'll see how they decide to spend their money, because anyone over 55 right now I don't believe that they really trust Bitcoin that much, or are very inclined to put their money into it. But that money is going to be going to millennials in the next 10 to 20 years.
I also think that, but one of my rationales is that once we do hit a supply shock type of event, that we're going to get a lot of flow into altcoins. I think people are going to eventually see the constraint of Bitcoin as more people adopt to it, as more people begin to interact with it, and that'll drive more of the money downwards into the coin, into the top 50, top 100, and it'll just perpetuate from there. So I'm hoping it does what it similarly does when it flows out of Bitcoin now during the cycles. We'll see. I want to hit this. What do we got? What are our thoughts on where we are with the pi cycle top indicator? Obviously, we flip flop a lot on it. Everybody who watches knows. CJ.
Yeah, well, we're in no danger of intersecting currently, but when we do, or if we do, say if Bitcoin goes up to like, 80 or 90K. But Chris Vincentini, I see you saying that you're over 55 and you're still into crypto. I know you are the exception. You are the minority, my friend. But back to the Pi Cycle top. This one is in no risk of intersecting yet, but I'm definitely going to be watching that and looking to lighten up on some of my holdings when we get to that intersection.
Yeah, great question from Christian K. Are you hodling your BTC or moving more into alts? I'll take that real quick. First, I'm not looking to move out of Bitcoin to put into alts. I've just been accumulating and putting more into alts directly. What about you guys? Have you guys been shading any of the BTC positions, or has it been pretty much just adding?
I personally haven't been trimming any of my BTC position. I, like you, Alex, have only been adding. I don't think now is the time to necessarily be trimming your BTC. Considering where we're at in the market cycle, all those things we just talked about, I think that over the next few months, it's primed to perform very well. So yeah, instead of moving my BTC in the alts, I've just been moving my USDC that I've been holding to, accumulate that 10% interest. I've been putting that to work in the altcoins because I think that over the next few months, they will far outperform 10%.
Hey, here's a common question again. Well, first of all, CJ, thanks for disrupting the live chat. There's now a whole flood of people posting their age and saying I'm full into crypto. So, congrats to all you guys. CJ, go ahead. I didn't let you answer that one.
I haven't been moving into alts recently, just because most of my capital has been invested for the past 3 weeks to a month. So I haven't really lightened up either, but I guess I'm neutral bullish here. September might be a flat month. Who knows? We might end up something down 5%. But either way, I think I'm still very neutral bullish going into the fall season here.
Okay, very cool. Real quickly hitting the comments for a second here. Jeanette, I'm over 65 and into crypto since February. My friend in her 70s got me going. I mean, the comments are not stopping, CJ. Look at these things. My dad is 82 and holds Bitcoin.
I'm not trying to be ageist or have ageism here. That is amazing. I'm really happy that you guys are into that. It's just in my personal life, when it comes to my dad's friends or other individuals who are even in finance, they don't want to embrace it. It doesn't seem intuitive. And so that's just the only reason I say that is because when let's say if there is a very rough crash in the equity market, I don't think people are going to take their money in equities and put it into crypto, because the majority of people who have the majority of money in equities are over 55. And I don't believe that they trust crypto fully yet. If Apple or Tesla are crashing, I don't think they're just going to say, oh, well, there's nowhere better to put my money, so let me put it into crypto. That type of logic and that thinking doesn't really make sense to me.
Well, we do have a winner here. I mean, Marcus is 256 years old, and he's head deep into Doge. So God bless you, Marcus. Oh, man. A lot to unpack here, guys. Overall sentiment is feeling bullish. If you want to know what CJ and Monty and myself speak about before we go on to the shows, it's what our market feelings are. And today's was no exception to what we've been feeling for a lot of last week as well. And that is the strength and momentum of the market, the sentiment of the market going in, the technical analysis of the market. We're looking to shape up for a strong beginning to September. And I guess it all comes down to whether we can keep that momentum going, because if we can, then the hope is to battle out through the rest of the year, possibly into Q1 before shutting this show down. Just to be honest with you, that's the feeling. Okay. So that's our thinking along time frame wise. Other than that, thanks for joining us today on this Monday. Don't forget to check out marketrebellion.com/crypto, as well as the daily.
You got it. Come on.
The Daily Digital Bite and oh, that's Polygon calling me. Sorry.
It's the Daily Crypto Bite,
Daily
Alex.
Crypto Bite. I'm so sorry, I had a brain freeze there. The Daily Crypto Bite. This it's in the description. The link to that. Catch these guys every morning. I think they just put out something for their members as well on one of the coins, so definitely check them out. TradeTheChain.com, guys. Hang on to your handlebars. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck and God bless.